Welcome everyone to SDSF Live. As you're logging on, please let us know where you're logging on from. I'm Nicole, coming to you from Houston, Texas. My co-host Michelle, coming from Michigan, is having a little bit of technical difficulty, so we'll see if she can resume co-hosting with me tonight. We are both board members of the Shwachman-Diamond Syndrome Foundation, providing support for patients and families with SDS around the world. The show is public. Please do not ask any personal questions. We upload all of our shows onto the SDSF website as well as YouTube. On YouTube, we add subtitles, and you can then choose what language you would like the show to read the show in. That continues to be so cool to me. And then we're also converting all the shows into podcasts soon. So if it's easier to listen to them, that will be an option today soon. I like to listen to podcasts, folding laundry, washing dishes, while I'm walking. I love podcasts. We are so excited for this afternoon's guests. We have the SDS Registry with us, not one, not two, but three guests from the registry. We have Dr. Akiko Shimamura and Maggie Malsch from Boston Children's Hospital. We also have Dr. Cass Myers from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Today's giveaway has been generously donated by the registry. It's the Swaggy Tote. I got my tote in November at SDS Day, and it's so cool. It's so well made. I use it for everything, for the library, bring toys in the car, to the beach. This is a really great giveaway. So you can win this giveaway, this tote, by interacting with the show in any way. Like, comment, share, start a watch party. So interact with the show in any way, and you could win this tote. So we're going to start the show with our first poll question. What is your involvement with the registry? Never heard of it, joined but did not follow up, or I send info every year. So we'll let you guys respond to that. Hi, Jackie. Hi, Jen. Hi, Bradley. Hi, Julie. Hi, Amy. Hi, Michelle. Can we hear you, Michelle?
I hope so.
Woo! Yay! And
we all need to send Evelyn a big thank you present because I just hijacked her computer.
We have Canada, Mexico, Houston, England, Canada, New York. Oh, Michelle, I'm so glad you're on.
Nicole, we need to get, you know what we need behind us? We need those time zone clocks.
Yes, that would be so great.
That's what we need.
Oh, gosh. Hi, Joan. Hi, Shelly. Don't forget to tell us where you're logging in from.
What did I miss? Catch me up.
So we had the first poll question. What is their involvement with the SDS registry? So we're waiting for that to come in. So I know we say this a lot. We have a lot to cover this show. So we want to get to all of your questions. So let's get started. So let's bring all the ladies on. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Dr. Myers. Hi, Dr. Shimamura. How are you guys? Thank you. Welcome to our show. Oh.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Dr. Shimamura, can we hear you too?
Oh, am I not?
Yeah, you're on. Okay, Maggie, I just want to make sure we can hear you too. Maggie? Oh, Maggie's audio is not on yet.
Oh, it looks like it's on now.
Okay, great. Okay, just want to make sure we're okay. Okay, we're going to dive right in because we have like 30-something questions to get to. What is the SDS registry?
So we can all tag team, but maybe I'll just get started, and we would welcome, this is a great forum for interaction and for us to hear from all of you, so we really look forward to hearing your thoughts. But really, the SDS Registry arose from the recognition that SDS is a rare disease. And it's very difficult to advance treatment and improve medical care for a rare disease unless you can collect information from enough patients. And I think we all in Cincinnati and Boston receive calls from doctors or hospitals or clinics where they've never seen an SDS patient before, or perhaps have only seen one or two, and they're really not sure how to do right by their patients. What should they be doing? And even the published reports really had very limited information on patients with Shwachman-Diamond syndrome because no one can collect information from enough patients to really make headway. So this idea developed to develop a way to work in partnership with patients and families who are living with SDS. And that's where we formed the registry. Now, I will have to say that looking back now, the term registry, when I looked up the definition of registry, really doesn't capture what this is all about. So according to the dictionary, a registry is, quote, a place or office where records or registers are kept. So it sounds like this sort of just passive collection of records and things, but that doesn't really capture the dynamic process where this registry is developed to provide a venue for patients and families who want to help find a cure for SDS. Right? It's a way for you to partner with us to accelerate research in SDS and find a cure, find treatments and cures for SDS. And we really embark on this as a partnership. We can't do this without your help. And the progress depends on the interest and support of patients and families who want to beat SDS. So that's one part of the registry. And the second part is really to provide an education and resource. You know, we, as the information comes in, we're learning a lot about SDS and we're trying to publish as fast as we can. And we'll tell you about some of what we've been able to share with the medical community. But as questions come up, we are very happy to share cutting edge, the latest, greatest information that we've gleaned from you. You've shared this information with us. We share it then back to patients and families with questions or medical providers who call us and say, we don't know what to do with our patient with SDS, what do we do? And we just share the data that we have so that they can, and partner with them to help them make the best decisions there. I'm going to stop and give Kaz and Maggie a chance to chime in as well.
Yeah, I'd really just like to echo what Akiko just said about this being a partnership between us and all of you, because certainly none of the work that we're doing could be done without you. And really trying to, in a rare disease, sort of get the big picture in addition to each individual patient is really important. And without having sort of a cohesive group and following them over a long time, being able to sort of see that picture and share it with other doctors and researchers wouldn't be possible. So it's really, it's an important partnership. And just as Akiko said, you know, we definitely want to move the research forward and find better treatments and a cure for SDS. But part of that along the way is us wanting to share what we know and help educate both families and physicians who don't see as many patients with SDS. So we sort of see our mission kind of including both of those things to make sure that, you know, we're helping today as we try to move things forward for tomorrow.
I would just add to that, in addition, I had another thought, which is the other important function that the registry serves is to provide sort of a nidus for identifying the most important questions with the highest impact. Based on data that you've shared with us, we base the questions that we ask are based on what you are identifying for us, the struggles and the issues that you're dealing with, and the greatest threats to your health. And then we then take that and go out and recruit the best researchers to try to partner with us to answer those questions. And we'll give you some examples later in this show. But this approach has been successful in pulling together a whole network of experts across both pediatrics and adult medicine, and really partnering together and forming an increasing sort of collaborative network to really tackle these important questions that you've identified for us.
Is it possible to have you guys identify what are each of your roles within the registry? Some people may not know where you guys are.
Sure. So Kaz, do you want to start on this one?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Akiko started the registry, and that was a huge endeavor a little over 10 years ago. And a few years later, I joined and helped direct the registry from Cincinnati. So it's really a partnership where we work together to sort of, as we said, identify important questions and try to use the data gathered by the registry to answer those questions. So we're involved kind of in all aspects of both the analysis and sort of dissemination of research data, as well as trying to find collaborative projects with people outside of our fields. So, you know, I'm a bone marrow transplant doctor, and Kiko's a hematologist, but obviously SDS affects a lot of different areas of the body, and so that's one of the important things that we do as well. And then certainly, you know, as physicians working to try to collaborate with people's local physicians to help them with their care.
Maybe I would just add to that. So maybe we should just say a little bit about our interests, which Kaz started to allude to. Kaz is an expert in transplant and really focuses on transplant for SDS, as one of the leading experts in that field. I'm trained as a physician and a scientist. I do laboratory-based research, which complements Kaz's interest in more clinical research. I think that this has been a really wonderful collaboration where we share our different areas of expertise. And I direct the bone marrow failure program at Boston Children's Hospital, and it's been a wonderful collaboration with Kaz in Cincinnati, trying to work together to advance treatments for SDS patients. I would add that in addition to this upper level of leadership that Kaz and I direct for the registry, because you have to have focus and direction, we also have recruited a scientific advisory board of currently 10 physicians and researchers from across the United States that include some of the leading experts in adult and pediatric medicine. And not only in hematology, we also have a GI expert, and we're recruiting experts from other disciplines. We have a whole list of collaborators that we'll discuss later. And then we also have our family liaison. So that is Nicole, Nicole Shen, and Esther Hars, who have kindly agreed to work with the registry. And their role is to communicate registry activities in progress to all of you, patients and families. They are putting out newsletters, so they're responsible for putting out newsletters, social media communications, and really letting you know about the registry. And also, they then report back to us concerns that they're hearing from families and patients back to us in the registry to make sure that we take those into consideration and adjust our areas of focus to make sure we're addressing areas of concern to you. And then Maggie, I'll let you introduce yourself. Maggie is critical with Sarah, who can't do it, to the function of the registry.
Thank you, Akiko. So my name is Maggie Malsch, and I'm a nurse at Boston Children's Hospital. I work under Akiko on a lot of her bone marrow failure projects, but specifically for the registry. I help consent, obtain samples, work with our research coordinators to sort of collaborate all the shipments out to you guys, communication about obtaining sort of yearly records. And then we work very closely with sort of my counterpart at Cincinnati, Sarah Lovelace. She's the sort of nurse that's in charge of the registry there. And, we work very closely together. So, if ever you don't know who to contact, you can contact either one of us. And, we talk all the time. So, great. Thanks.
Yeah, we meet once a month, not in person. We have a conference call once a month. And more when needed if there are urgent issues. And the whole team joins, Maggie's team and Sarah's team, as well as Kaz and I, and some of the younger investigators who are joining now. I think another important mission of the registry is to recruit young talent because we need to keep the talent stream going, right? So that's an important mission there as well.
We had a question come in from Joan. She says, can you elaborate on how important the impact of each patient's individual is?
Do you want to take that, Cass?
Sure. Yeah. So, every data point is absolutely critical because without longitudinal data, which means over time on a lot of patients, we can't sort of pick out what is critical to Shwachman-Diamond syndrome and what is sort of unique to that person, but not necessarily related to SDS. And so kind of, using the analogy again of a forest and the trees, right? Each individual tree is unique, but when you put it all together, you can see the forest. And so it's very important. Every patient makes a huge difference. Every data point makes a huge difference. So, we're absolutely thrilled to have more patients enroll in the registry. And even just as important is to have those patients continue to have us follow their data, their medical care over time, because that will help us sort of better develop treatments in the future.
And I would echo that with a rare disease, every patient counts. And part of what we're trying to gain through the registry is to try to understand what is generalizable to all SDS patients and what is specific to that one SDS patient. Still very important, but very specific, right? We're all individuals and we all have things that happen to us individually, but then there are some issues that will be general for all SDS patients, and we need to tease those things out because that changes, right? How the medical care happens. And in addition, there's, for those of you with a research background, without sufficient numbers, you can't reach statistical significance. You can't figure out whether the changes that you're seeing or the differences that you're finding are significant. So we've just recently, I think, reached a critical mass of patients, of patient numbers, where we can start to ask the big questions. You'll see there's starting to be an acceleration of papers that we're able to put together as we learn more and more and are able to share meaningful data. So thanks to everybody who's participated. We actually dedicated the last paper that we submitted. There's a dedication in it to everybody who is a part of the registry, because this was only possible because of you.
We've talked a little bit about how important the data you get is, but what data do you need from a family who's wanting to consent to the registry?
Maggie, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, we can take that on, or I can take that on, excuse me. So what data? I think it's based on, we like any data that you can give us. We like yearly data. So, somebody like, Nicole and her family contacts us every year and says, I had my son had a visit. Do you guys want the records? Yes, we would love the records. And you can either, send us information about your sort of physician and we can get those records, or you can share them share the medical records directly with us. But yearly, when we get either bone marrow samples or blood samples, we like the information that goes along with those samples. So blood counts are very important. And then when we get marrow samples, any sort of analysis that went on with that bone marrow sample, those are really important for us. Akiko or Cass, do you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add that it's important to remember that once you enroll, that's great. But if we don't have any, if no records are sent or no samples are sent, we have nothing to study. So the first step is enrolling. That's great. But then from there, we need to work with you to obtain records and samples. And we try to make this as easy for you as possible. A lot of people express hesitation about joining the registry because everybody's busy. You're trying to care for your child or yourself with SDS, and the last thing you need is another thing on your plate. So we try to streamline this, and we try to do as much of your work for you as possible. And so if you sign a medical release, Maggie and Sarah and their teams can help reach out and obtain the medical records with you. The samples, we don't require any extra needle pokes. That's a big question we often get. There's no extra pokes or procedures. We only obtain samples when they're already being obtained as part of clinical care. So you just take a little bit extra, you pop it into a mailer, which Maggie can talk about. It's already pre-addressed, it's prepaid. You just you have your doctor pop the tubes into the box and just stick it in the mail. So any suggestions that you have to make it easier, we would welcome. A lot of this was implemented in response to comments that we received from you. And Maggie, I don't know if you want to talk further about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see somebody just asked a question and said, I joined the registry a few years ago. Do we need to update data? So I'd like to say that we can reach out to every physician every year to get everybody's data. But logistically, that's challenging. A lot of times we don't get responses from physicians, or it doesn't get sent to us, or sort of a plethora of other sort of reasons why we may not get your data. So if it's always more helpful if the patient and family either sends us the data, paper records, or sort of helps us connect with their physician to get those records. And if you're not sure when the last time was that you updated your data, you can send us an email. The SDS Registry DL is sort of available, and that contacts all of us. And we can reach out, to your physician for you.
Yeah, and I would just add that as far as what particular data is important is we definitely want to follow the blood counts and the marrows, but we also are very cognizant that those are not the only important features of SDS. And so if there is something that you think is particularly important in your child's care, or a subspecialist that you see very regularly, that is very involved in your child's care, then that is somebody we definitely want to make sure we're getting the records from, because we do want to capture the entire picture.
I saw a question about COVID. In the COVID era, are we still able to collect samples and records? And the answer now is yes. For a time, the registry, as everywhere else, had to sort of curtail activity because of all the restrictions for COVID. But now we're totally up and running. We can accept samples, we can accept data. Everything is back up to speed. So thank you for that question.
Consent, we've always been able to consent virtually. So definitely reach out to us if you've been sort of waiting, to consent because of, COVID restrictions. We are available and working remotely and can still call you and set up that consent with you.
And I see somebody asked a question about getting medical records from Care Everywhere. And that is sometimes possible, but not always. There has to be a consent that is signed for Care Everywhere, and not all data is visible in Care Everywhere. So some of the specialized tests don't transmit quite as well as one might like, especially bone marrow reports and things like that. Genetic testing is also not really great through Care Everywhere. And so it is a resource. We try to use it as much as possible, but it's not ubiquitous.
That makes a lot of sense. We had a question come in and it sort of got buried because I love how much people are interacting. Where can I find all the information that you have published?
So that's a great question. There's a lot of different levels to that. So the physicians and researchers can find it, through PubMed. PubMed is also free. You can look things up in PubMed. But we are revamping our website because we want to be able to give data back to all of you. So we're revamping our website so that it is responsive in real time. Right now, it's sort of set on a separate server, and it takes a lot of work to try to update it. So this will be a new platform where we in real time can update it. We've also set up, thank you to Maggie, a Facebook page. We have a Twitter account where we're trying to get the word out on Facebook and Twitter about new data coming out. And we're always available. People have contacted us and asked for updates, and we've responded in that way as well. If you have ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, certainly. If you have specific questions about data from the registry, if we have data on a specific question within SDS, that's something that we'd always be happy to look at.
And actually, later in this presentation, we've prepared some slides anticipating this question, just outlining some of the progress made through what are the accomplishments of the registry. So we put together some highlights for you, which I hope you'll enjoy.
Someone had asked, maybe a suggestion for you guys, is it possible to send yearly reminders to families by email to get updates? Or I know this is a question I've had a lot because I tend to be that person that forgets to send in, to ask for the marrow kit until a week before. So I'm really good with time management.
So I can answer that question. So we try to send out yearly reminders. To be honest, it probably gets sent out every sort of year and a half. And for kits for marrows, we ask for about, a month's notice, but we really can do it on sort of a day's notice. If there isn't enough time for us to send you a kit, we can communicate with your physician, send them the instructions, send them the prepaid FedEx label, and all they have to do is sort of find a shipper and send it back to us. So we're pretty flexible in terms of timing. If you remember us when you schedule your marrow, that would be great. But if you don't remember us until you're going into the marrow, just let us know, and we'll try to figure out something to sort of help out.
Joan had a good question too. When you're asking for data, are you also including the psychological and behavioral issues?
So we collect data, as Kaz and Maggie said, on all aspects. So whatever is sent to us, we collect. We can't collect anything if it's not sent to us. So we are trying to encourage everybody to send in all of their records on whatever aspect of their health for which they have records. Again, this is a very patient-driven effort. We purposely did that. There are a lot of efforts. In my own lab, we have model systems. I'll tell you about some of them. Other groups, other amazing researchers have set up animal models and this and that. But the emphasis of the registry is we want to learn from patients. But we can only do that with whatever patients share with us. So if there are issues that are of high concern to you, that you want to make sure those data are studied and collected, then please send them in.
Catherine had said, good morning from Australia. I love that we're in Australia. Are you connected with the Maggie Rewalt Foundation, and can you share data with this existing source?
I can take that one because I have been interacting in a different capacity with the Maggie Rewalt Vision effort. This is an amazing foundation set up by Maddie's family. So Maddie's family her brothers are these amazing, is it Australian? Now I'm going to get it wrong. Football? Is that what it's called? Players who, I looked them up. I really got into this. It was a very cool sport, which I had never known very much about before. And I got to meet their family. They invited me to give a talk, but more on bone marrow failure, not specifically on Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. But we got to talking, and they've set up an amazing registry. And we'll talk about, there's going to be a question later about registries. And there are registries all over the world. Australia is one that is collecting as part of their registry for bone marrow failure data on Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. And we are collaborating on certain projects. So there are, as you know, and there will be a question later about confidentiality, there are very strict regulations that are intended to safeguard the confidentiality of your information, right? And we can't make this publicly available. We are restricted by these restrictions, which are important restrictions. However, written into our registry are allowances in the consent form, wherein we can set up collaborations with other researchers and share de-identified data. We cannot share your name, your date of birth, anything that personally identifies you, but we can, in a collaborative manner with appropriate, regulatory boxes checked off, share data, and other places can share data with us to move forward the research. So the short answer to your question is yes, it is possible for collaborative efforts between different registries, and there are lots of them throughout the world. And Maddie Rewalt is an amazing effort. You guys have the Minister of Health behind you, very powerful. It's very new, but I anticipate that you're going to make tremendous strides. And you've recruited a really talented group of investigators in Australia. So whatever we can do to help, we've been happy to do.
Jose had asked, hi, we have a 22-month-old boy we haven't registered yet, as we don't know if it only applies to U.S. residents, or is this a global registry? We live in Mexico, and here there's very little information specifically about transplants. And then the secondary question was, are they able to schedule appointments with you if they have lots of questions, even if they're not able to be seen in person?
Yeah, so I'll take that. The registry, we do enroll patients outside of the United States. Patients that are in areas in which there are existing registries, we do encourage you to also enroll in the registries in your area as well. But we do have patients outside the United States enrolled in the registry. And so, we would love to have you reach out to us. Also, we are happy to talk with families about their child or their care. We can't obviously give advice to patients that we can't see, but we can sort of discuss sort of general SDS advice and clinical care with patients and families or with physicians. And so certainly I've had families who have asked me to talk to their doctors about Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. And I know Kiko has done the same. And so, that's part of what the registry would like to do, is help people with their care. Yeah.
Is the data you publish available to the public? I believe you had said it was in PubMed.
Yes, so there's a requirement from the government to make data, that is, make studies that have been funded with public monies, namely like the NIH, which funds the majority of our research. We had a big 5-year grant that ran out, but we were able to get a second 5-year grant, so we're very grateful to the NIH, as well as other funding agencies. And huge thanks to those of you who've donated to the registry. This would not be possible without you, I would say, so I'm digressing a bit. But so on PubMed, there are avenues for the public to access these studies. So absolutely. And also I've received, and all of us I think have received, requests for papers that we've published, and we will distribute those. We're not allowed to post them on our websites for like copyright reasons, but we can certainly share on an individual basis papers that we've published.
What happens to the data you collect?
So the data, so I think that I heard someone say it, the next question is what happens to the data that we collect? So the data are stored in a secure, password protected database behind a firewall. And the firewall is so strong that sometimes we can't even reach our own firewall when we're trying to communicate with each other. It's a very strict, but you know, I mean, in this day and age, I don't want to say it's 100% secure. Like, I mean, there's all this crazy stuff going on in the world, but it's as secure as we know how to make it. And it's behind the hospital firewall. So it's not out there in the public domain. Having said that, the data are there. We also store medical records that are given to us in very secure files. And if there are physical records that we have, these are in locked cabinets, in locked rooms within buildings that require ID access. So we're trying to make it as secure as possible. One of the questions that comes up is, you know, could other people somehow access registry data and use it against somebody on the registry? And what I would say to that is your data in the registry are not accessible to anyone outside the registry or registry investigators. The insurance companies cannot access this data. The hospital cannot access this data in the registry because your insurance companies don't pay for these studies. It's paid for by grants. And so since they're not paying for it, they don't get access to those data. Unless you personally give them access, you would have to personally give them the data. So in that sense, it's more secure than your medical record, right? Your medical record in the hospital files, your insurance can access that, you know, according to and that's quite different from registry where the insurance cannot access. I hope that's helpful. The samples are kept in a central lab. It's called the Trans Lab. All the samples from Boston, from Cincinnati, from anywhere go to the Trans Lab for central sort of processing and storage. And then those are retrieved on a study-by-study basis as the samples are needed.
How specifically do I need to get the information to you and how often?
Could you repeat that question, Nicole?
Sure. How specifically do I need to get the information to you and how often?
So people send information to us via email, or you can send us paper records. Some people send us an email every time they go see their doctor. Some people send us sort of a yearly update. So I would say that we would like it at least once a year, and it's sort of whatever works best for you. If you would like to discuss options of how to get it to us, I would be happy to talk to you about that. Whomever.
How does it benefit the patient to be part of the registry?
Would this be a good time for us to share our little summary of sort of things that the registry has accomplished and sort of where we're going? Maybe this would be a good moment. So I will share my screen if I can. All right, let's see if I can successfully do this. And then Kaz and I will tag team. So I'm going to try to make this a... Is that working? Can people see that?
Yes, we can see it. It looks great.
Okay, so
I would maybe make it a little bit bigger, Orva. Can you? I see you're trying to work on it. So let me tell you how to do your job a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Great. So these are so people often ask us, you know, what does the registry do? What does the registry bring? And what sort of things are we looking at? And so we wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the questions that we are looking at as a registry. And these questions are, as we sort of discussed before, questions that require a big number of patients to answer. They can't really be answered by looking at 1 or 2 or even a dozen or 24 patients. We really need a large number of patients to get enough information to make this to make meaningful interpretations that can help us guide patients' care. So some of the questions that we're looking at are, what are the major health complications over a lifetime of someone with SDS? Because our goal is to make our patients as healthy as possible and extend their lifetime significantly into adulthood. And so having data not only in younger patients, but in patients as they age and their healthcare changes is very important. One question that is always very high on many families' minds is, what are the chances that someone with SDS will develop severely low blood counts or bone marrow failure or myelodysplasia or leukemia? And are there any markers that can help us predict these things, these blood complications of SDS? Are there ways that we can prevent these or other medical complications of SDS? And how we can develop better treatments. So not only looking for these problems and trying to identify them earlier, which is very important, but have better ways of addressing them or even preventing them in the future.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to advance. How do I?
It's okay.
Why won't it let me advance my slides? Let me try. Oh, okay.
So we covered this a little bit earlier, but what other things what does the registry do besides the big task of research? Is we really want to be an educational resource, not only to educate the medical community and the research community about SDS and help them provide better care, but also a resource for families that are looking for expertise in SDS, how to navigate their child's medical care, and living with SDS. So some of the things that we've learned so far, this is just, we'd like to highlight a few of the things that we've learned from the data that everybody has so kindly given us already in the first 10 years of the registry. One of our very first papers looked at the clinical spectrum of SDS. And that means sort of the variety of presentations or problems that different patients have with SDS. So if we read the textbook, there's one way that patients with SDS present, and that's with low neutrophils and failure to thrive with pancreatic dysfunction and diarrhea. And what we learned in this paper is that not everybody presents like the textbook says. In fact, about 50% of patients don't. And so this was very critical, actually, in getting more people, more physicians in the field to be willing to test patients for Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. So it helped us diagnose more patients. And it helped these patients convince insurance companies to cover this testing for patients, even though they didn't fit within the classic box that is described for Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. And so this is actually a huge paper that I think has really moved the field forward. And then another follow-up paper to that was looking specifically at heart issues in Shwachman-Diamond syndrome and looking at a new technique for looking at cardiac function or heart function, how well the heart squeezes. And this is important because many medical therapies that patients with Shwachman-Diamond syndrome get, specifically transplant therapies or leukemia therapies can affect heart function. And we know that patients with SDS historically in the past had more heart-related complications with their chemotherapy. So this study looked at a new way, the cardiac strain, of looking for changes in heart function in patients with SDS to help better identify those at risk before the treatment and then follow them after treatment as well.
So I guess we'll switch off at this point and I'll do the next few slides. So this was a paper in collaboration with Dr. Baram, who reached out to us in the registry because he had identified a candidate gene as a cause of an SDS-like disorder. And we went on to help him with that study and showed that, yes, this gene can cause features that look a lot like SDS. And this is important because it provides a diagnosis for patients who present with features of SDS. It also overall advances our understanding of these diseases. You know, the first step towards tailored medical care is diagnosis. You've got to have the correct diagnosis. So this was one more gene to add to our armamentarium to make the correct diagnosis. Another study was a collaboration with Carl Novina at Dana-Farber, where we discovered that the TGF-beta pathway, which is an inflammatory pathway or a signaling pathway, that it turns out is hyperactivated in the bone marrow of patients with SDS. And actually, it's been shown to show up in other patients with bone marrow failure as well. And we showed that you can target this pathway and improve blood cell production in the bone marrow of patients with SDS. So it's a potential therapy, a potential therapeutic target to improve blood counts. And so we're busy working on this. We're trying to understand how the TGF-beta pathway works and do more preclinical studies to see if this is something that's worth bringing into clinical trial. And the reason that that's important is in a sort of additional study that we were doing simultaneously, Melissa Ruiz Gutierrez, a very talented MD PhD trainee in my lab, was using induced pluripotent stem cells derived from patients with Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. So what are induced pluripotent stem cells, or IPS cells? Those are cells that we derived from the bone marrow that you can cause to go back into a stem cell state that can then differentiate into all kinds of different cell types, the pancreas, neurons, the blood cells, etc. And in this case, we use these cells to genomically sort of introduce mutations associated with MDS. It was a way to try to model MDS in Shwachman-Diamond syndrome, which currently has not been previously possible. And so we identified a potential strategy to improve blood counts, hopefully without promoting outgrowth of these MDS cells. So again, this is a potential therapeutic target that we're working very hard to look at further. Because of course, anything that stimulates blood counts, stimulates good blood cell production, might also stimulate bad blood cell production, that is MDS cells. And we want to suppress MDS, but improve good blood cell production. There's a recent publication with a young investigator, Dr. Alyssa Furatani, who together with Kaz and I in the registry showed that a subset of patients with Shwachman-Diamond syndrome develop inflammatory complications, arthritis, inflammation of the eyes called blepharitis, and sometimes even contractures, almost like a scleroderma autoimmune type of reaction in the joints. And this was important because it raised awareness of these complications. We also published the treatments that these patients received and their outcomes. These are tricky to treat, right? Because patients with SDS have other medical issues that you've got to balance, right? You could potentially treat the inflammation but cause other problems to get worse. So we wanted to publish sort of the outcomes of these treatments. And we've already received phone calls about this because people are identifying patients with these complications and they don't know what to do. So this publication, I think, is very important, both in terms of understanding the spectrum of biology associated with SDS and potential medical implications. How do we treat this? We had a wonderful collaboration with Dr. Don Ingber, a very famous bioengineer who founded the Wyss Institute here at Harvard in bioengineering. And he developed a marrow-on-a-chip organoid model, and he was looking for a disease to model. And so happily, we connected with him and convinced him to model SDS. And so he did that and published in Nature Biomedical Engineering. And this is important because it gives us a model system to study the bone marrow abnormalities in Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. So we take bone marrow from patients with SDS and culture them in this 3D marrow on a chip, which I'll show you in a moment. And this provides a potential preclinical model to test potential drugs to treat SDS or complications of SDS. And just, I don't have time to go into it in detail, but it was so cool. I just wanted to show you this one picture of the chip that gives you the hematopoietic compartment, the stromal compartment, as well as the vascular channel, you know, the blood vessels. It's been a really neat sort of system to try to study this in a way that you can experimentally interrogate. We also had a wonderful collaboration with Dr. Dan Link at WashU. Many of you know him. And together with Dan, who really led this study, discovered that P53 mutations frequently develop in individuals with SDS at an early age. P53, for those of you who don't know, is a gene that is frequently mutated in cancer, even cancers in the general population, not SDS, any kind of cancer. And P53 is a very important gene that protects the integrity of the genome. It sort of guards the genome. It's a checkpoint that gets rid of damaged cells and tries to protect cells from accumulating damage that can progress to cancer. So this is important because this is the beginning of efforts to understand why people with SDS are at increased risk of developing marrow failure and leukemia. But this study was one snapshot in time. They took patients and we looked at one snapshot in time. And we actually could not conclude from this paper what the clinical significance of P53 mutations were, because we found it in patients without MDS or leukemia. So what does this mean? And so in order to get at that question, we collaborated with Coleman Lindsley, who is an expert in the genomics of MDS. He's published in the New England Journal, and he's really one of the leaders in the field now. And together with Dr. Alyssa Kennedy, who was a postdoctoral fellow in my lab, and identified genomic signatures associated with MDS and leukemia using single-cell sequencing of bone marrow samples. And we had to, and getting to Joan's question, this paper was dependent on the analysis of longitudinal collection of samples over time. We could only answer this question if we could follow the bone marrow samples over time and correlate the genomic signatures that we saw with the clinical outcomes of these patients. Who developed MDS? Who developed AML? Who's still stable? Who's developed marrow failure? And this isn't published yet, but we've actually put this out in the public domain as a preprint. So I've put all the authors here. As you can see, this was a tour de force. We basically partnered with any physician who would partner with us to share samples they've collected. We've partnered with patients and families to identify patients at high, and we believe that we've identified now a signature that flags patients at high risk for MDS or AML. And this is important because this then allows a discussion with patients and physicians to determine whether these patients might benefit from early transplant before MDS or AML develop when survival is high. Oops, I skipped one of our very important papers. Sorry, I was doing this just before this. We have another paper that we published through the registry that is identifying the fact that MDS and particularly AML have a very, very poor prognosis. Once these malignancies develop, survival is challenging. And so it behooves us then to develop better treatments for these malignancies, but also hopefully identify through this study patients at high risk, excuse me, of malignancy so we can intervene when survival is still high. And just to let you know, we will be offering this single cell sequencing to patients submitting samples on the SDS registry. And we can share these data with physicians, the treating physicians, if patients give us permission to do so. We will not be able to run these tests in real time. It's not a clinical test that we can offer, it's a research test. But when the research tests are run, if we find something that's actionable, we can share that data with your physicians so that you can take advantage of this emerging area. Oh, sorry, this is all animated. So some ongoing projects, we're trying to figure out better treatments for MDS and AML. We're trying to improve surveillance. We're trying to identify the medical complications in MDS, and we have a paper that's currently being led by Cass that will be coming out with the natural history of SDS. We also are understanding that we're focusing a lot on the blood complications of SDS. And the reason for that is not just because we're hematologists. It's because the blood complications of Shwachman-Diamond syndrome are emerging as the major threat to a patient's lifespan with SDS. It's the major life-threatening complication in SDS. It doesn't mean that the other medical issues are not important. They're all important. But the hematologic complications of the life are most often life-threatening ones. And they have these complications, the blood complications in Shwachman-Diamond syndrome, have to be treated differently from these complications that arise in the non-SDS patients. You can't just take treatment for bone marrow failure in the non-SDS patient or treatment of MDS or AML in non-SDS patients and apply that to patients with SDS. It doesn't work and it's too toxic, right? So SDS blood complications require very different treatments. This is different from, for example, the pancreas abnormalities or the neurocognitive abnormalities or the endocrine abnormalities. Once those are identified, the treatments for those complications are the same as the treatments that are used for non-SDS patients. Those treatments are generalizable across SDS and non-SDS, right? The important thing is to identify them, but once they're identified, the treatments are the same. In blood complications, it's different, and the blood complications are insidious. I would say that from a daily, just from what we're seeing in the registry, from a daily standpoint, the blood problems often are the least of a patient's daily issues, right? They often are doing fine from a blood standpoint, and that can lull patients into just ignoring the need for surveillance because it's not causing problems on a daily basis until it's too late. And so we need to figure out more effective ways. You know, it's awful to have a bone marrow every year. It's the only thing we have right now, but we're trying to develop sort of blood markers so that we don't have to keep doing marrows on everybody. And also to identify markers of patients at high risk who might benefit best from marrows. So we're running out of time. I'm not going to go into all the rest of this, but just to say we've got a ton of collaborations. We're working really hard and there's a lot of excitement. And I'm just going to stop here because we're running out of time. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
That was really great. I know everyone's kind of excited to hear a lot about what the registry is doing. And I don't think it's any surprise that we're all sort of feeling a little off this week because we're all supposed to be in Maine. So I don't know if we've said it yet, but thank you for being here tonight, just because it is important. We want to throw up a poll, and we want to know that if you are not on the registry, what is your reason for being on the registry? Or if you're not on the registry, what is your reason that you're not on the registry yet? And I think Orva's going to throw up the right one in just a second because we're sort of jumping around and we're doing great. And I know we've been on the registry for quite a few years, but honestly, it's only because I was sat down at camp and had the papers put in front of me, so I had no chance of losing them. I had no chance of forgetting about them. I couldn't set it down or not write it in my planner and do it later. And this isn't meant to be a judgmental question. We're not asking it so we can hound you about why you're doing it, but this is only to help the registry sort of understand maybe some easier ways they could, get to things or help families or better ways to assist them, because the registry is a very important tool that we have. And we want to be sure that everyone can be utilizing it. Because like they said, a disease may be rare, but every patient counts.
I've heard some people say, my child has been doing really well. I don't think they should be on the registry or stuff like that. I think there's some confusion sometimes about who's on the registry.
Yeah, I think this is Cass. I think, the patients that are doing well are just as important as those who are having difficulties, because that really allows us to see the full picture of how patients are doing. And as Akiko said, the study that looked over time at patients' bone marrows, really we would never have been able to identify the markers of a trend towards developing leukemia if we didn't have a comparison of patients who had not had that complication develop. And so, it's just another example of every patient counts. Really, and to be honest, I have a lot of families ask me questions about what the future might look for their child, and so to be able to say that there are patients who sort of fit the full spectrum is very important. And I think it helps in diagnosis because, as we said before, not everybody reads the book, and so it's important for physicians who don't see a lot of patients with SDS to also hear that some patients have milder symptoms than others.
I would echo that. I think it's critically important. If we only collect data on patients who are having medical complications, we're going to think that everybody with SDS only has medical complications. And if that's not the case, we need to understand that. And also from a bone marrow study standpoint, if we can identify signatures that put people into a good category, a mild category, as opposed to a high risk category, that would be tremendous, right? Because then we can identify patients who don't need surveillance maybe versus those that do. And we can only do that if we have a whole spectrum of some people who are doing well and some people who aren't, and compare them and figure out what's different. So the people who are not having complications have as much to teach us, important things to teach us, as those who are, both from a clinical standpoint, from a biological standpoint, that ultimately I think will help us better treat patients. It's not a one-size-fits-all for Shwachman-Diamond syndrome, as we as physicians need to get better at figuring out who needs what type of treatment, sort of a precision medicine tailored approach to medical management and treatment for Shwachman-Diamond syndrome, but we can't do it without everyone's help.
So one of the questions that we'd had were, how many patients are currently on the registry? And then do you guys have the tool to tell us that how many of those are clinical and how many are genetic?
So we do have that. So currently, when I last checked, we have 267 people with SDS on the registry. Of those, 175 are gene positive, 84 are clinical SDS, and then 8 people are very interesting. They have one SBDS mutation and look like clinical SDS. So the question is, is there a second mutation that's been missed, or is there something else going on? Do they have an SDS-like disorder? And then we have 130 family members. We're very interested in collecting samples and in some cases data on family members, particularly for those with clinical SDS where we can't find a gene, but also increasingly for those with genetic SDS. We are very grateful for samples from family members because of certain studies that we're trying to do, for example, the gene therapy studies, and we're trying to understand how the different mutations might affect the severity of the disease. And in order to tease that out, we need samples from family members.
Interesting. I like that you mentioned that there's 8 with that one gene. I never knew that there was that you could, sort of separate the clinicals, no genes, and the clinicals with one gene. That's interesting. So now that we know how important the registry is and why we all need to be on it, how do we get families to sign up for this? What is the easiest way to get a hold of someone or some way to join the registry and be part of this very important information?
So I can take that. So we have a registry email. It's SDS Registry -DL at childrens.harvard.edu. And I know that's quite long, but I'll have the foundation post it. But you can just email us there and just say, I'm interested in joining the registry. And what happens after that is either, Sarah at Cincinnati will contact you, and they will set up a time to sort of share the consent with you, go over the consent, and sort of assist you in getting that documentation back to us.
And then, like you guys had said earlier, there is the website to go on, which I'm sure has all of the information in the emails that you had just mentioned, as well as other information about the doctors and where they're located. And you said you are revamping it, so if it does look a little like it's in the works, or just have some patience with it.
So I would say we're very excited that we have this number of patients, but in order to go where we need to go, we need to triple or quadruple that number. We need hundreds of patients in order to robustly answer these very important questions. And so with your help, we hope that we'll be able to get there. And we're so grateful to all of you who've joined. Our knowledge of SDS would not be where it is today without you. And I hope that more people will join us in this fight against SDS, and that we can continue to work together to get hundreds of patients on the registry.
Absolutely. I remember when we were celebrating that we had gotten 200, and that was such a big moment. I think we were in Cincinnati at that point, because I remember Leanne bringing us cake because we were admitted upstairs, and so there was this 200 cake on the HEMOC floor, and everyone was like, "Why do you have cake?" But like you said, it is important to have so many patients to compare against, because SDS is so rare and so weird, and even when it's common amongst us, no one child is like the other child or patient, and so it's important to have those to compare and contrast against. I want to thank you for letting us take up so much of your time, and we've gone way over what we said we would, and I know that we had some technical issues, and I think it all worked out really great. I want to remind people that by liking, commenting, sharing this, letting other families that you know that maybe didn't see this to watch it. We have this beautiful, amazing registry tote. It is, like Nicole says, goes to the beach. It withstands a lot of wear and tear, which I know our families can wear and tear a lot of stuff. So we like things that are durable for all of us.
It's also a good conversation starter. What is that? When people read it.
Yes, you don't often see the words SDSR on something, and then you're like, "Is that the name of a camera? What is that?" And you're like, "Actually, let me tell you. Let me talk to you a little bit. Let me talk your ear off for an hour and a half, and then you can care about this too." And so it really does work wonders to get people to understand what SDS is. And I know we still had a whole lot of questions. I know we had a lot of viewer questions that had came in, but I want you all to know that we are taking them down, and we will submit them to the doctors and then get answers for you. We also know that we're like well over an hour, and we all have very precious time. But the one thing I love about this panel of doctors and nurses and all of the people who are involved with SDS Registry is that they're very open to helping whenever they can and wherever they can. So just because the show is ending at an hour does not necessarily mean your questions will not be answered.
And feel free to reach out to us, even if you didn't post a question. If you have a question, we want to make this useful to you. So please let us or our family liaison representatives are here to help you and help with communication. So let us know how we can best help.
Yeah, please. I'd like to echo that too. Please reach out if you have questions. We're always happy to chat.
We want to thank Orva, Gracie, and Esther for working behind the scenes on this show. The show was possible because they help us make this show possible. And to thank all the other board members and our president, Joan, that helps put on the show. We will be continuing our camp series soon. We have Dr. Grover, Dr. McCaslin, Nancy Sankata, and Dr. Tobin coming up. Be safe, everyone. Wash your hands, wear your masks, don't touch your face. We love you. See you next time.
Use hand sanitizer, stay like 10 feet away from people. Let us know if you need anything. The foundation, I don't know if it's well known, Nicole, I'd like to plug it, that there's a little bit of a relief effort in the foundation that if you are experiencing troubles, please reach out to the foundation. There has been a lot of donations that have came in just to simply help families get through this tough time of uncertainty with the economy, with jobs, with medications, with traveling to see doctors. Please reach out. There is help available through the foundation for you. And as well as we can also get your information to the wonderful doctors that we had on today, because obviously everything's a little weird with telehealth and we're all at different hospitals and different locations. So please reach out if you need anything.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Have a good day.